But I wanted to try something which I've done live, but I've never done on Zoom. And it may be a complete disaster, but it's caused, it's allowed me to have some great experiences. And it refers to, it picks up on the Quaker faith, the Protestant faith of Quakerism. And if you know about Quaker faith and Quaker worship, they have a form of worship called silent worship, in which they sit there in silence. And if people are moved by the Spirit of God or the Spirit of anything, for example, they will stand up and speak. But if they don't want to say anything, they don't say anything. No one asks any questions. They just say, if something comes into their mind that they want to share, they say it. But this involves people being prepared to sit in silence until and unless they want to say something. So I'm going to ask us to do exactly the same kind of thing now. It's been quite an intense 2 hours. We've had an awful lot of comment on the chat box. Anna's been describing in detail something she's talked about, and some of you have shared your experiences big time. But now let's just sit for a little bit in silence and just let the thoughts, no chat box, nothing, just let's sit in silence. If you want to say something, everyone can have their microphones on now. Just switch on your microphones, everybody. Switch them on, unmute yourselves, everybody. Thank you. So we'll just sit here for a little bit. And if nobody says anything, we'll stop sitting here. And then we'll hand over back to Mark for a continuation of the chat in other forms. But for the moment, I'm going to shut up. If anyone wants to say something, just say it. I want to say something, which is that most times when you go to a talk, the talk finishes and everyone goes away. But silence is a way which we do what Mark was talking about before, experience plus reflection.
One thing that I would like to say is that on this note of getting a guest in your classes, is well, it made me remember, you know, the Freedom Writer's Diary. Yeah. So how in the past it was so difficult to get someone in your class, and now it's like, you know, get in touch with them, prepare the lesson, and then it could be something that could generate lots of good things. So,
yeah, and it literally opens the world, because my third guest is going to be in Vermont.
With the greatest respect, we don't answer what people say. We just let them say it. No, sorry.
No.
This is for my little experiment. Sorry. Okay.
Okay. Thank you.
We'll only do this for another 2 or 3 minutes, and then we throw the place open, and that's the end of that. I'm so sorry, Anne. That was terribly rude of me, but I just wanted to see what would happen.
I would also like to say something. I think, I mean, what I feel right now is, you know, when I look at the number of people in this classroom, that I think it's great to, you know, we're all in different countries, to feel the energy and the passion of what we share. And that is very invigorating. So thank you all.
I'd just like to say, I love this, Jeremy. What a wonderful experiment this is, because a lot of what's I talk to her, but I remember growing up with my mother. She's a very introverted person, and we'd spend a lot of time just silent together in a room. But it was a very bonding experience always. And being quiet with people we love is always, just being together is a very bonding experience. And it's wonderful to feel, it feels like it's really working here over the Zoom. I feel very connecting, just looking at people being silent in all the different places. So wonderful, wonderful experiment. Very interesting and nice.
I would just like to say this conversation has empowered me so much. Thank you very much.
In a minute, we'll call this to an end, but we'll give it just another minute or so, or two, in case anybody wants to say anything.
I apologize to speak again. But because we're looking at each other's faces directly, it almost becomes one of those exercises where you feel like laughing, actually, by being silent for so long. I think normally we'd all be looking at the floor or quiet, not looking at each other, and that changes it a bit.
I've just been thinking about the fact that I am not a teacher as the rest of you. I'm basically a musician who taught some things in classes over a 22-year period. And I am just fascinated with what all of you are doing and admire it greatly.
I would also like to thank you all. And I think in all this, excuse my French, I hope there are not so many French speakers, fucking crazy situation, all with COVID. I was thinking when we were about to move for a while to Netherlands, how the hell am I going to keep in touch with my professional colleagues and friends and the people I've been learning from? So in all that being so negative, these are very touchy-feely moments, and I still can keep on going and in self kind of education and self-development thanks to all these events. So thank you very much to all of you who are in part of organizing team of that. And I still can be part of it, which is great. Although I miss meeting everybody face to face, but this is great because really more people from all different countries can get together and share experience and ideas and their expertise, which is great. So thank you.
In a minute, I'm going to probably suggest we bring this to a close. Looking around the faces, but the spirit isn't necessarily moving you to say anything. And so I want to say thank you for those comments. I want to say a massive thank you to Anne for being prepared to share her experience with us.
You're very welcome.
and to pick up on what Mark just said, and as you say, something that we discovered before this in our musical encounters. You used a word, we've been talking about things like empathy and being led. Anne's been talking about being led by the students, being able to sort of give them a chance. Agency, she used the word agency before, which is a very important word, I think, in terms of teaching and how we view the teaching-learning relationship. But the word that resonates with me a lot, and which I've talked about myself in sessions I've done about this, is a word that Mark used, which was, he talked about intimate or intimacy. And then David picked up on that as well in this issue with silence. And I think, and then Anne also picked up on that when she was talking about the fact that you can actually see everyone's faces. Although Judith and various other people pointed that some of our students don't want their cameras on, and that's a whole other issue we'll talk about some other time. But the fact is, we have managed as a group just this evening to bond significantly. We're all talking about things that we know about and that we care about and that matter to us because it's what we do. And it's, you know, it's what we've been doing for, in my case, hundreds of years, and so on and so forth. But you know, I've been to millions of teacher development sessions in my life, and they don't feel quite like this. So, Mark, your comment about intimacy seems to me to be absolutely sort of spot on, really. So there we are. I'm going to go. But I, you know, it doesn't mean no one else has to go. But some of you do have to go, and so you should be free to go at this point. Otherwise,
Jeremy, just before you go, when do you ever get in a workshop at a conference 15 people who are looking at each other's faces in the way that we are looking at each other's faces at the moment?
Yeah, I get that entirely. And before, in conversations I've had with you and with a couple of other people, we've talked about not just the intimacy, but funnily enough, we talked about silence as well. And we've talked about the quality of listening. And it's something we've discovered in our music, which is I've listened to people singing and making music in a way that is much more powerful than I often do when I'm going off to the bar to buy a pint or sort of, I don't know what you do. There's something really special about this kind of environment. I think the only thing I'd say in answer to my question to Anne about gifts and curses is, and I know that Anne would back me up on this, is the only, for me, the biggest downside of this, apart from the fact that some students don't have the right access and some students this and difficult problems in households and all sorts of stuff like that. I think the thing that I would worry about is the sheer relentlessness of it, and the relentlessness of teaching as some of you do, you know, 7, 8, 9 hours a day online. Now that's tough stuff.
I've been teaching 8 hours today.
And with an extra 2 hours to add on top just for fun.
But from a teacher training perspective, I've watched so many webinars and attended so many online conferences in the last 8 months, and I've never experienced what I've experienced tonight, and particularly now, you know, in these last 5 minutes, right? Like, I haven't experienced, so much is focused on transmission of content, you know, and not so much on how you develop this kind of feeling of togetherness and empathy and listening, you know, that people don't talk about these things. Okay, they might talk about it on a PowerPoint slide, but they don't actually experience it. And I have never, since March, since the lockdown in March, I haven't experienced a moment like we are experiencing now in the last 5 minutes, you know, like.
I'm nervous because I'm like that. I'm very much. I tend to be a glass half empty person a lot of the time, and I'm very nervous about getting too emotional and too starry-eyed about it. But I kind of I understand what you're saying exactly, which is I'm feeling good at the moment. I'm feeling really good and sort of satisfied at a deep level. About that's a lot to do with you, Anne, of course, but it's not just to do with you. It's to do with you know the thing that I discovered on Zoom, which I can't get over. And again, I'm referring to music here. As I said, ridiculously, I taught online for 13 years. And yes, we had some really intense moments in discussions, but they weren't face-to-face discussions. They were asynchronous. So they were typed discussions, and they were really intense and absolutely fantastic. But nothing like this ever happened. And nothing like the classes you're all teaching online ever happened. And I've talked myself into losing the thread of the sentence I was making.
Jeremy, what is it then about? Let's try and analyze this, because this is a really special moment now, you know, like not to just go off immediately. Like, what is it about? And I like everyone to think about this. What is it about this moment, you know? Is it to do with it? Is it because we can see each other like this? Is it to do with coming out of the pandemic? Yeah. Is it like the fact that we've been here for 2 hours now? You could normally not do this. Everyone would have gone. You can't do like more than 45 minutes. Everyone's left. They can't.
I'm sorry to laugh. But Maria's saying her phone's almost run out of juice, so she'll be off in a second. But I've got an answer to that, but this is just my answer. And it involves many things we've just talked about. It involves the intimacy, the silence, the quality of listening, and crucially, and we discussed this before some weeks ago, you and I and a couple of others, because the other word we used was presence. Presence. People are present in a way that sometimes in a classroom they're not. I remember terribly well attending a class in Hamamatsu in Japan, an English class. And I won't go into details about it, but essentially all these teenage girls were absolutely perfect students in that they did not move a muscle or create the slightest disruptive ripples at all, even though some of them fell asleep and this, that, and the other. But they were in the classroom, but I'm not at all sure that they were present, in the sense of, you know, what I always say about this is, you know, what do we want students to bring to a classroom pre-pandemic? What do you want a student to bring to the classroom? And I always say, I want them to bring themselves, but I don't mean their physical selves. They have to bring their presence with them. They have to be present in the room. And so a lot of what they do, and Anne's demonstrated this so well in this discussion a number of times, what our job is to provoke their presence among us through what we do, how we speak to them, how we prioritize their experience at the beginning of every session, so that they are in the room. They have to be here in the room. And now I think Zoom, with all its awkwardnesses, and yes, some people alluded earlier on in the chat box about the things that go wrong on Zoom, and the times when you disappear or the sound goes or the blah, blah, blah. All of that happens, the crap happens. And then, forgive my language, but it's not as bad as fucking whatever it was that Ilona was talking about. But you know, or Anne chasing her sheep around, her collie dog chasing the sheep around, all this kind of stuff goes wrong. And you know, and she's now been at this for sort of 10 straight hours today, and she must be absolutely wiped out. All of that, and yet, everyone is present in this room, and there is something that, you know, and I'm just sitting in my office where I sit most of my day, sort of sitting here writing books or playing guitars or being on Zoom. I mean, that's what we do. And yet I'm more present than I frequently am in a classroom or a folk club. And I think
I think it's also a skill we learn now with going online. It was very interesting, actually. Earlier today, I was with a student who was new to my class and two students who had been for a long time. And this guy was clearly having one half of his brain dedicated to something else. And there was a multiple choice question exercise that we were doing, and he was just giving us random answers. So this went on twice, so I knew exactly what he was doing. He was kind of half with us and half wherever. And I just pulled him up on it. I said, look, you need to be with us. And so far, I've seen that you are not putting in the effort. Your answers are not proportionate to your ability to speak. And that was the last I had to say about that, because from then he was like, ooh, shit, boof. And he was with us. You know, I do take them if they, you know, and similarly with things like interrupting, which I've very rudely done now, but I do say to them, it's Jeremy's turn. It's Jeremy's turn. So, and they don't do it again. They don't interrupt. And having this kind of disciplined environment in which people who are not speaking switch off their microphone. If you have unwanted background noise, you make sure that other people don't have to suffer along with you. The only exception I make is the call for prayer in Saudi Arabia at 11 o'clock in the morning, and we comment on the singing abilities of the person who's singing at that time, and it's just one of the highlights now. It's like, oh, and then we all listen to Saudi Arabia, to the call of prayer. It's just a magical moment. So
I got two things to say about that. A tour I did, a speaking tour I did in Pakistan, fascinated me because all sessions start with a recitation from the Quran, which doesn't mean speaking. It means precisely that kind of singing that in which the Quran is recited. And in one city, it was you know, people in the audience, all the teachers just kept talking. In another one, they kind of kept talking, and the women were doing their stuff, and they blah 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 blah. And then we got to Islamabad, and there was absolute silence. It's very interesting how different that is. I've got one last thing. I've got to go. But there's one last thing I want to say, of course, and this is why I think it's a corrective I make always when I'm running development sessions and talking about teaching. And the corrective is this: if you run a session with teachers, it will usually be a great success. Why? Because we're quite a nice bunch, to be honest. We're cooperative. We know what the speaker is doing, or the interviewer, or Anne, or we all know what we're doing. And on the whole, we have this mindset, which is we want it to go well. So I can do something insane, for example, and say we're going to sit in silence, and nobody says that's a bloody stupid idea, and absolutely nobody got their phone out or anything. None of that. Because we're nice people and we're cooperative, and we all want this to be a positive experience. And the one thing you have to remember is that when you take activities like that straight from here into a classroom, there is no guarantee that it's going to go as well, because students are students are students, and you know, this is a lot easier. However, having said all of that, when Anne wants to teach me Flemish, I'm up for it, because I reckon that she'd be a bloody good teacher, and I'd probably learn very well.
You're on.
And if okay, that was just a figure of speech. No, of course I would love you to. But in the meantime, thank you all very much for coming to this session. Mark, thank you for inviting both of us to take part.
Both of you have contributed enormously in the last 3 days to the success of creating an atmosphere on this course. You know, it's only been going now for 3 days, but somehow I feel as though it's been a lot longer already. And you've created, honestly, a wonderful framework for us to explore many things over the next month. My idea for this was to create a bit of space where people could contribute their experiences over the last 7 or 8 months, you know, to have a little bit of input, not too much, because honestly, in a lot of teacher training, there's far too many people keen to bring all the greatest news about ELT and telling people how they should have this app and that app and all of that.
Oh, I hate that.
Yeah, this is basically space for people to come together and to, yeah, Ronan, I'll be with you in a minute. Yeah, like I'll be like, think of what?
Oh.
They're still beating Bayern Munich, are they? But what this is a space for people to come together it's to raise money for Soul. That's really important. But it's an experiment. You know, we've never done anything like this before, and I'm keen to try to bring in the good things that we've done at Soul for a long time with teacher development courses where you have a good balance of, yes, Ronan, in a minute, yeah, social and pedagogical stuff. Anyway, I can't. Ronan's still talking. You know what I mean, anyway.
You do know what you mean.
I will keep this open now. Bev, I'd like to talk to you a little bit about the American election. Yeah, I know Frank. I don't know if he's still here. He's interested in American election and chatting and that thing. If anyone wants.
Okay, listen, guys. Mark, you're fabulous. Bev, I want to say for you, because I know the way you think, I just want to wish you the very best of luck today. But it's also entirely co-equal with my wishes for exactly the same outcome as well.
Thank you.
The rest of you, thank you for being here. And finally, and thank you for allowing yourself to be subjected to questions and sort of probing and all that kind of thing. I found it revelatory, and I hope everybody else did too.
Thank you very much, Jeremy. It was a real joy to be subjected to your prodding.
Ladies and gentlemen, lovely to see you. Good night. See you later.
Thanks,
Bye-bye.
Jeremy.
Bye-bye. Bye.
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 Bye.